Angry black clouds swept ominously over a small swath of the North Pacific. Bursting, they unleashed a torrential storm that roiled the dark and restless sea. Monster waves, violent and white-capped, battered the shores of a small rocky island that was home to hundreds of sea mammals. Just as suddenly as it arrived, the storm abated, leaving the island drenched and glistening. Within moments, a magnificent rainbow appeared and descended gently to touch a high rocky outcrop. The rainbow's lovely daughters could be seen as they laughed and danced up and down its arch. As usual, Polychrome, the rainbow's most fearless daughter, ventured too close to the end. Before she realized her danger, the rainbow had lifted and she was left alone on a gray, craggy rock. Oh dear, she sighed. Father will surely be annoyed to learn I've been left behind once again. It'll take days before he finds me. She'd been left on the earth a number of times without serious consequences, so she accepted her situation stoically and began to take notice of her surroundings. A rocky little island, she thought, inhabited only by barking seals. Not much to do until father returns. Gingerly, she made her way down to a small grotto and perched herself on a rock, elbows on knees, to stare into the icy pool and consider her dilemma. A moment later, a baby seal rose to the surface. Are you a seal hunter? It asked. Before she could answer, it added with some heat, if you are, you must lead. We don't permit seal hunters here, do we, Mama? Its mother immediately appeared. Don't be foolish, Clipper. She's not here to hunt. She turned to Polychrome. You're lost, aren't you? Yes, said Polychrome, hopping off the rock. I've lost my rainbow, so I'm stranded here until father returns. Oh, so you're a daughter of the rainbow. Yes, I'm Polychrome. I'm Friska, returned the seal, slapping her flipper in a friendly manner. And this is my baby Clipper. We'll be glad to keep you company until the rainbow comes back. But that could be a while, she added, seeing that the sky was now a bright blue with high white clouds. Just then, the pool eddied and a face appeared, a face of such beauty that Polychrome drew in her breath. A mermaid lying just on the water's surface was looking up at her. She wore a small tiara and a strand of pearls. Her hair, a golden halo, floated around her head, while her garments trailed over her glistening tail. Hello, Sister Fairy, she said to Polychrome in a sweet, tinkling voice. Welcome to Sea Island and the Sea Fairies' favorite winter grotto. There was another soft splash and a second face appeared, this one even prettier and surrounded by a mass of dark floating curls. Both Friska and Clipper bowed before the two mermaids, who in turn smiled at them. The second one spoke. I am Merla, she said, and this is my cousin, Princess Clea. We know you've been stranded on Seal Island, since it won't storm for at least another 3 days. There's little chance of the rainbows returning until then. We therefore invite you to visit our underwater kingdom and to meet our queen, Aquarain, and the sea serpent, Anko, king of the ocean. I'd be delighted, said Polychrome, realizing her father's reappearance would likely take some time. But must I become a mermaid to do so? Indeed, smiled Merla, but that's easily accomplished. In the very next second, Polychrome felt a great desire to flop into the water, which she did. When she looked down at her legs, she saw they'd become a fishtail, whose scales, iridescently beautiful, were as multicolored as the gauzy garments that floated gracefully around her. Noting this transformation with pleasure, Merla nodded at her cousin, and the two mermaids motioned for Polychrome to follow them to the bottom of the pool and out into the depths of the ocean. Before they could descend, Friska called out, can we come too? It's been a long while since I've seen Anko, and Clip has never met him. Of course, said Cleo, you're both welcome. What about me? Bellowed a deep voice, and they were joined by a huge whiskered walrus, so old his wrinkles had wrinkles and his long yellow tusks were chipped and worn. What about me? He repeated. Oh, Wiggles, you know you can visit anytime you want, but do come with us. I'm pleased to have an invite, he said gruffly, then caught sight of Polychrome. Who's she? Polychrome, the daughter of the rainbow, answered Friska helpfully. She's stranded, and we're taking her to visit Aquarain for a few days. Wiggles dipped his head politely toward Polychrome, and she returned the acknowledgement. But the walrus wasn't finished. What about Margaret? Is Margaret nearby? Asked Clea. Yes, he answered, over there. He pointed a flipper to a barnacle-covered cave. I think she wants to come too, but you know how shy she is. With a glance at her cousin, Clea swam over to the cave's opening. Margaret, we'd like you to come meet Polychrome and come with us to visit Aquarain and Anko. Will you? A large black and white orca, her huge eyes set inside slanted white patches, glided from the cave. I'd like that very much, she answered, nervously wringing her pectoral fins, but I don't want to intrude. Goodness, you won't be intruding. Patting Margaret gently on her dorsal fin, Princess Clea coaxed her to come along. The orca looked at the group, seemed to gain courage from what she saw, and swam out to meet them. Then she sounded, and the others followed, making their way down to the mid-depths of the ocean where they could travel more swiftly and in relative calm. As they swam through the greenish-tinged waters of the Pacific, Polychrome turned to Wiggles. How is it that you, Margaret, the seals, and I are able to breathe underwater? Mermaid magic, replied Wiggles. Polychrome nodded, then asked, I thought orcas were killers. Why is Margaret allowed in your company? Margaret only eats seaweed and bottom plants and is therefore no threat to us sea mammals and fish, explained Wiggles. Unfortunately, he added, this also means she's no longer welcomed by her pod. He brushed his left whiskers with a flipper. However, I never forget that Margaret is, in the end, a killer whale. At some point, her instincts could take over. He then shot forth with a burst of speed that belied his age, and Polychrome had to swim quickly to catch up with him. Clea and Merle began a steep descent, and before long, Polychrome and the others had their first glimpse of the coral palace of the Mermaid Queen. Following their guides, they swam through the undersea gardens into a large and lofty hall. From there, they passed into a magnificent throne room whose high domed roof was made of glass. Queen Aquarain, her attendants, and other courtiers were reclining on jewel-encrusted couches. The queen sat on a raised platform. Princess Clea first introduced Polychrome to Aquarain. After welcoming the Rainbow's daughter, the queen greeted Friska, whom she was delighted to see again. She withdrew a conch rattle from her gown and handed it to Clipper, who immediately gave a thankful bark and turned a somersault. Aquarain was as gracious to Wiggles went out of her way to make sure that Margaret, who was trying to hide behind a sea fern curtain, felt especially at home. Just as the queen was about to offer her guests some refreshments, one of the attendants called to her, Your Majesty, King Anko is here, then swam upward to open a door high in the glass dome. King Anko had a round head, a flat nose, a wide mouth, and gentle blue eyes. White stubby hairs surrounded his face like a beard, and his smile, which showed two stubby teeth, was pleasant. He wiggled a small portion of his immense length through the dome's door and drifted down into the throne room. After bowing to Aquarain, he greeted Friska, Clipper, Wiggles, and Margaret before turning to Polychrome. And who are you, my child, he asked. Polychrome, the Rainbow's daughter. Oh, perhaps you're aware that your father and I know each other. In fact, he also knows my two brothers, Unko and Inko. They each have their own ocean, and your father has occasion to set down in one or the other from time to time. It's been perhaps 1,000 years since I last saw the rainbow, but I'm assuming he's well. Yes, Your Majesty, he is, replied Polychrome. I've heard of you too, as father often tells us stories of his past. The sea serpent smiled at her and then returned his attention to Aquarain. Perhaps, Your Majesty, I could borrow Polychrome for a moment's consultation. Seeing the queen's perplexed look, he explained, my brothers and I have recently met to discuss two problems. The first is serious. Long ago, when I destroyed the prince of the devilfish, his subjects lost their ferocity and soon learned to tolerate and be tolerated by their undersea neighbors. Without a ruler, they even gave their allegiance to me. Now, however, Wrath, who is larger and stronger than the others, has assumed control over the band, which has begun to stir up trouble in my ocean and my brothers. I need to stop this self-appointed prince before he causes harm. Surely, said Aquarain, this is not something Polychrome can help with. No, of course not, Anko said, but she can help with the second. The all too numerous starfish that are crowding our ocean floors. Polychrome's father's realm is in the sky, and perhaps she might ask him to keep any more stars from relocating to our seas. They need to be told to stay where they belong. He looked at Polychrome hopefully, and his whiskers gently waved in the current. Polychrome had to hide a smile, but she said graciously, I will most certainly discuss this issue with father when I see him. I suspect he's unaware that so many stars are finding their way to your ocean floors. He may know what's behind their migration, and when he learns it's upsetting you and your brothers, he'll request the Moon Queen to put an end to it. King Anko bobbed his head in gratitude. But this Prince Wrath, exclaimed Aquarain, he sounds dangerous. He is, I assure you, nodded Anko, and I will need your help to put a stop to his mischief making. Would a visit to him be helpful? King Anko considered this. Perhaps, he answered, we might convince him that living in harmony with his neighbors is preferable to causing them pain and anxiety. Aquarain motioned to Princess Clea and Merla, and the three moved off to confer quietly. Returning to the group, the queen said, both Clea and Merla agree an official visit by King Anko and me would be proper, and they would like to accompany us. And to show Prince Wrath our mission is peaceful and non-threatening, I'm also inviting Polychrome, Friska, Margaret, and Wiggles. And me too, cried Clipper before his mother could hush him. No, dear, no, dear, said the queen. You'd better stay here with my attendants. It's a long swim to the devil caves, and it would tire you, but she added, you may eat ice cream and play with the jellyfish. With that, the baby seal seemed content. After some light refreshment, the travelers set toward the devil caves. Aquarain had been right. The way was long, and on their journey, they encountered many different species of fish and sea creatures, including cuttlefish, lobsters, sea turtles, crabs, swordfish, octopi, salmon, cod, and a pod of orcas. The latter turned up their noses at Margaret and abruptly swam off in a opposite direction. Noticing Margaret's pained look, Polychrome swam up close to her. My dear, she said, patting her back, they're just meanies. You're a better orca than all of them put together. Margaret blinked back tears. Thank you, Miss Polychrome. It's just I'm so lonesome away from my pod. I miss my sister terribly. I even miss old Grampus. Who's he? He's the king of the orcas and leader of my pod. It was Grampus who forced me out when I wouldn't kill living prey. She shook her head and smiled, but I still miss him. They swam along in silence for another hour, but soon Anko and Aquarain began to slow. Ahead of them was a steep range of underwater mountains, and on the side of one were the openings to several large caves. Once outside the largest, Aquarain held up a hand and the others glided to a halt. Anko, will you please let Prince Wrath know we are here? The sea serpent did as asked, shouting to the devilfish prince to come out and meet them. Quickly, a school of red devilfish emerged from the cave's opening and began circling the group, all the while avoiding Anko's lengthy body. They laughed mockingly and waved their feelers menacingly, but otherwise made no attempt to harm the visitors. Soon the outline of the devilfish prince filled the cave's opening, and then he was before them. Wrath was deep crimson and larger than any creature Polychrome had seen, except Anko. His body was much like that of a giant spider's, but instead of 4 legs on each side, he had hundreds of thin tentacle-like feelers. These waved and groped in a terrifying manner. His elongated head was topped by 4 antennae, which also waved, almost as if probing the visitors. His deep-set eyes glowed like coals. Greetings, his voice was low and sharp. To what do I owe the honor of this visit? His lips curled evilly as he said this, and Polychrome, though a fairy and unlikely to come to harm, shivered. We wish to discuss you and your subjects, replied Anko. May we come in? By all means, said Wrath, gesturing for them to enter. Anko looked at Aquarain, and the queen in turn looked at the others. Then, by mutual consent, the entire party swam into the cave, Anko arriving last. That is, Anko's head had entered, but most of his body, by necessity, remained outside. The prince's throne room was vast, hundreds of feet wide, and like the mermaid's palace, enclosed in a glass dome at least 4 stories high. It was luxuriously decorated with sea flowers, jeweled couches, thick wall hangings, woven sea grass rugs, and lavish statuary. High above, near the dome, a huge, dense forest of living kelp wafted back and forth in some unseen current. Wrath pointed to the couches and invited his visitors to sit. Anko began the discussion. It has come to my attention that your subjects have been causing trouble for many of my and my brother's subjects. We are here to request that you command them to live peacefully with their ocean neighbors. The prince's eyes bulged with displeasure at this speech. Suppose I don't agree to your request. Then you would be foolish, replied Anko. I am, after all, king of this ocean and have many magical powers at my disposal. I will destroy you if you persist in making trouble in the seas, just, he added, as I destroyed your predecessor. The prince glared at him before speaking. You're powerless to harm me, and I'll tell you why. Knowing you were coming in your mission, I ordered the capture of the king of the orcas and am now holding him hostage. I don't believe you, said Anko. Then see for yourself. Wrath clapped his feelers. At once, 2 devilfish swam into the room, hauling a long rope. At the end was an old graying orca whose body and fins were firmly bound. Turning sad eyes on the visitors, he began to shake miserably. Grampus! Oh no! Horrified, Margaret spun off her couch and in furious rage charged the prince. Surprised, Wrath made a quick feint to the left and then shot upward toward the dome. Margaret gave chase, and her speed was such that she gradually overtook him. Slowly but steadily, she forced him closer and closer to the edge of the kelp forest. Before realizing his danger, Wrath had swum straight into it and was instantly encased in its thousand of kelp tendrils. He struggled mightily to free himself and almost succeeded, but Margaret, her eyes glinting in rage, gave him a tremendous head shove, pushing him even deeper into the grip of the imprisoning seaweed. Wrath's body and feelers were now wrapped so tightly he knew there'd be no escape. A plaintive chorus, low and reedy, began to arrive from the forest of kelp. Wrath is not a good prince, the chorus moaned. We will hold him here forever for the good of our great oceans. These words were echoed over and over, and by now Aquarain, Anko, and the others had reached Margaret. All saw the doomed look of hatred in Wrath's eyes and knew he had met the fate he deserved. Slowly they swam back down to the throne room, and Polychrome heard Wiggles mutter, I knew it. Once a killer whale, always a killer whale. Grampus, on the other hand, was looking at Margaret with admiration and love. My girl, he rasped, you saved my life. Can you ever forgive me? And will you please come back to the pod? Of course, Grampus, she said, biting through his ropes and freeing him. I've missed you all so much, but tell me, she said earnestly, do you still want me if I eat just seaweed and bottom plants? We want you, my dear, whatever you eat, and we've missed you too. This has taught me I must appreciate differences among my orcas. Anko winked at Aquarain, who smiled at Polychrome, Merla, and Clea. Friska clapped her flippers, and Wiggles made a pretense of brushing his whiskers to hide his emotions. Anko then turned to one of the red devilfish. You there, I'm turning over this band of devilfish to you, and if I hear one word that your subjects are causing trouble, we'll return. Then you'll have me and Margaret to answer to. The devilfish bowed and scurried away, clearly headed to tell his fellow devilfish that they'd better behave. The return journey to Aquarain's palace seemed shorter, possibly because they were all feeling safer with the destruction of Wrath. Margaret swam cozily alongside Grampus, talking happily and clearly, no longer feeling shy. When they finally arrived at the palace, they ate a quiet supper and went to their rooms for the night. The following day, Polychrome, Wiggles, Clipper, and his mother, Margaret, and Grampus remained guests of the lovely mermaid queen, feasting at her table and enjoying her gardens. But on the morning of the third day, one of Aquarain's subjects entered the throne room to announce that a storm was brewing in the North Pacific. Polychrome immediately looked at the queen. Then I must be going. Father has obviously learned where I lost the rainbow and will be cross if I'm not on the island when he appears. I agree, dear, said Aquarain, taking her hand. I'll send Clea and Merla back with you to see you are safe. And we should all be leaving as well, said Grampus with a nod to Margaret. Yes, she agreed. I'm anxious to be with my pod again. I'm glad I was invited here, Your Majesty, along with Polychrome, and I'm glad I wasn't too shy to do what was needed to be done. Everyone was silent for a moment, realizing the debt owed her. Finally, Wiggle said, I'll be leaving with Polly, and Friska added her intentions to go too. Me too, chimed in Clipper. Oh, yes, his mother laughed. You too. After saying their goodbyes, the travelers left the underground sea palace of the mermaids and swam northward using mermaid magic to help them swim more swiftly. Within hours, Princess Clea and Merla began ascending, and soon the swimmers broke through the ocean surface and were once again in the cold waters of the island grotto. The storm had just blown over, and though the wind and rain had died, all could still feel the waves buffeting them. Friska and her baby said their formal goodbyes and swam off. Wiggles laid a flipper on Polychrome's arm and wished her well before diving and disappearing. Margaret, shy again for the moment, touched Polychrome with her fin and laid her cheek against her. Thank you for being my friend, she said softly. Grampus gave a farewell salute, and both orcas sounded to swim in search of their pod. Polychrome turned to her mermaid friends. I shall never forget your kindness, she said, kissing them both. Please assure King Anko that father will take care of the starfish problem, and thank Queen Aquarain again for her hospitality. Now, she said, glancing down wistfully at her fishtail, will you please change me back to myself? Laughing, the two mermaids spoke a few words, and Polychrome found herself standing on two legs, looking down at their lovely faces.